Prime time or peak time is the block of broadcast programming taking place during the middle of the evening for television programming. The term prime time is often defined in terms of a fixed time period, for example, from 1900 to 2200 or 2000 to 2300. Asia, China, Hong Kong and Macau. Prime time here usually takes place from 2000 until 2200. After that, programs classified as PG are allowed to be broadcast. Frontline dramas appear during this time slot in Cantonese, as well as movies in English. People's Republic of China. In Chinese television, the 1900 to 2200 time slot is known as Golden Time. The term also influenced a nickname of a strip of holidays known as Golden Week. India. In India, prime time occurs between 2000 and 2300. The main news programs are broadcast at 20:30, and the highest-rated television program follows at 2100. Indonesia. Prime time usually takes place from 1800 to 2300 WIB, preceded by a daily newscast at 1700. After prime time, programs classified as adult are allowed to be broadcast. Like another Muslim-majority country, there is also a midnight prime time during Sahur time in a month of Ramadan. It takes place from 2:30 and ends at the Fajr prayer call. Varies between 4:30 and 5 o'clock. The time slot is usually filled with comedy and religious programming. Iraq. In Iraq, prime time runs from 2000 to 2300. The main news programs are broadcast at 2000 and the highest-rated television program airs at 2100. Japan. In Japanese television, the 1900 to 2200 time slot is also known as Golden Time. The term also influenced a nickname of a strip of holidays known as Golden Week. Malaysia. Malaysian prime time starts with the main news from 2000 to 2030 and ends at 2300. Usually, programs during prime time are domestic dramas, foreign drama series, movies and entertainment programs. Programs that classify as 18 are not allowed to be broadcast before 10 o'clock p.m., but on RTM, most programs on this slot are rated U throughout the whole day. However, programs broadcast after 2300 are still considered prime time. As of December 2010, NTV7's prime time continues until 12 o'clock a.m. Programs during prime time may have longer commercial breaks due to number of viewers. Some domestic primetime productions may be affected because of certain major sporting events such as FIFA World Cup. However, only FIFA World Cup in the Americas did not affect the domestic primetime programs. Philippines. In the Philippines, primetime blocks begin at 1800 and run until about 2300 on weekdays, and 1900 to 2300 on weekends. The weekday primetime blocks usually consists of local teleseries and foreign television series. The network's highest-rated programs are usually aired right after the evening newscast at 2000, while a foreign series usually precedes the late-night newscast. On weekends, non-scripted programming such as talent shows, reality shows and current affairs shows air in prime time. For the minor networks, prime time consists of American television series on weekdays, with encores of those shows on weekends. Prime time originally started earlier at around 1900, but the evening newscasts were lengthened to 90 minutes and now start at 1830. Instead of the original one-hour newscast that starts at 1800, Singapore. In Singapore, prime time begins at 1800. 1830 on MediaCorp Channel 8 and 1900 on MediaCorp Channel 5, MediaCorp Channel U, Channel News Asia, MediaCorp Surya, MediaCorp Vasantham and MediaCorp Octo, which are also the main television channels in Singapore. On Channel 8, prime time ends at 2400 or 0:15 on weekdays, at 0:30 on Saturday nights and at 23:30 on Sunday nights. On Channel 5, prime time ends at 0:00 on weekdays, at 1:30 on Saturday nights and at 0:30 on Sunday nights. On Surya, prime time ends at 23:30 on Monday to Thursday nights and at 2300 on Friday to Sunday nights. On Vasantham, prime time ends at 2300 on Mondays to Thursdays and at 2400 on Fridays to Sundays. On Channel News Asia, prime time ends at 23:01, immediately after the news headlines, 7 days a week. On Channel U, prime time ends at 2300 7 days a week, and on Octo, prime time ends at close down at 2400 or later. Generally, however, prime time is considered to be from 1830 to 2400. South Korea. In South Korea, prime time usually runs from 2000 to 2300 during the week, while on Saturdays and Sundays, it runs from 1800 to 2300. Family-oriented television shows are broadcast before 2200, and adult-oriented television shows air after 2200. Taiwan. In Taiwan, prime time starts at 2000 in the evening. Taiwanese drama series played then are called 8 o'clock series and are expected to have high viewer ratings. Thailand. In Thailand, prime time dramas air from 2030 to 2230. Most dramas are soap operas. Prime-time dramas are popular and influential to Thai society. Vietnam. In Vietnam, prime time is also known as golden time. Prime time starts at 2000 in the evening and ends at 2300. Europe. Bosnia and Herzegovina. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, prime time starts at 20:00 and finishes at 22:00. It is preceded by a daily newscast at 19:00 and followed by a late-night newscast at 22:00. Croatia. In Croatia, prime time starts between 20:00 and 20:15. Croatian public broadcaster HRT broadcasts a daily newscast from 19:00 to 20:00. Also, many private broadcasters have daily newscasts either before or after the HTY newscast at around 20:05, followed by the start of their own prime time. Many broadcasters without daily newscasts start the prime time at 20:00. Prime time generally ends between 22:00 and 23:00, followed by the late-night edition of the network newscast and adult-oriented programming. Denmark. In Denmark, prime time starts at 20:00. Finland. In Finland, prime time starts at 21:00. It is preceded by a daily newscast at 20:30. France. In France, prime time runs from 20:45 until around 22:30. Georgia. In Georgia, prime time starts between 18:45 and 20:00 and generally ends at 24:00. However, on Friday night, Saturday morning prime time usually continues until 1:00. Germany. At 20:00 each evening, Das Erste, Germany's oldest public television network, airs the country's most watched news broadcast. The main edition of the Tagesschau, which is also simulcast on most of its other specialist and regional channels. The conclusion of the bulletin 15 minutes later marks the beginning of prime time, as it has since the 1950s. In consequence, most channels also choose to start the prime time at 20:15. In the 1990s, the commercial channel SAT suffered a significant loss of audience share when it tried moving the start of its prime time to 20.00. Greece. In Greece, prime time runs from 21.00 to 24.00. Hungary. In Hungary, prime time on weekdays on the two big commercial stations starts at 19.00 with game shows, tabloid and docu-reality programs. At 21.00, two popular soap operas air, Baratok OZT and Joban Rostspan, which follows at 21.30. American and other series, movies, talk shows and magazines run until 23.30. The prime time lineup is preceded by daily news programs at 18.30. At weekends, prime time begins at 19.00, with blockbuster movies and television shows. Before the 15th of March 2015, the public television station M1 began its prime time with a game show at 18.30, which was followed by the daily news program Gerardo at 19.30. After the news, the channel broadcast American and other series, talk shows, magazines, and news programs until 22.00, after which came the daily news magazine Est and the late edition of Gerardo. For the 15th of March 2015, Duna began broadcasting all of the entertainment programming transferred to it from that date from M1, meaning that prime time on Duna now begins at 18.00, starting with the simulcast of the 18.00 edition of Gerardo from the newly relaunched news channel M1. Iceland. In Iceland, prime time starts at 19:30. It is preceded by a daily newscast at 1900. Italy. In Italy, prime time is from 9:15 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. It usually follows news and, on some networks, a slot called Access Prime Time. Shows, movies, and sport events are usually shown during prime time. Netherlands. Much like in Germany, prime time in the Netherlands usually begins at 8:30 p.m. in order to not compete with NOS Journal's flagship 8 o'clock p.m. newscast. Norway. In Norway, prime time starts at 19:45. On the NRK1 channel it is preceded by the daily newscast Dagsrevyen at 1900. Locally, prime time is called Besendated. Poland. In Poland, prime time starts around 2000. On it is preceded by a daily newscast at 1930. On the newscast is aired at 1900, followed by the news magazine Uwaga at 1950, 1945, and then the soap Na WS Polne at 2005. Various movies on Friday, show movies at Saturday, and programmer movies at Sunday. On the news is aired at 1850, followed by a sitcom WIAT Wedlug Kajapskich at 1930. Slovakia. Public television in Slovakia consists of two channels. On the main channel, prime time starts at 2010, and on the second one, prime time programming starts at 2000. The two biggest private broadcasters set the start of prime time programming at 2020 and 2030. Generally, however, prime time is considered to be from 2000 to 2300. Slovenia. In Slovenia, prime time, the period in which the most watched shows are broadcast, is from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. It is preceded by daily newscasts, Dnevnika TVSLO on TVSLO 1, 24-hour on Pop TV, Svetna Kanlu and Dims on Planet TV. Spain. In Spain, prime time refers to the time period in which the most watched shows are broadcast. Prime time in Spain starts quite late when compared to most nations, as it runs from 22:30 till 1 o'clock. Most news programs in Spain air at 2104 an hour, and prime time follows. However, due to fierce competition, especially among the private stations, prime time has even been delayed until 2300. Most channels are delaying prime time in order to protect their top shows from sporting events. In the 1990s, prime time in Spain began at 2100, moving to 2130 in the latter half of the 1990s and 2200 in the early 2000s. Commercial broadcaster La Sexta and the second channel from the public broadcasting La2 have attempted to shift prime time back to 2130 in 2006 and spring 2007, but these attempts have been unsuccessful. Fellow public channel La1 also tried to pull prime time back to 2100 in early 2015, to no avail. The lateness in the start of prime time in Spain is also due to Spanish culture. Spanish people generally work from 9 o'clock to 1400 and then from 1700 to 2000 as opposed to the standard 9 o'clock to 1700. The popular late-night show, Crónicas Marchonas during the late 1990s 2000 also helped to extend prime time well into the early hours, with the show being watched by a share of 40%. Despite finishing at 2 o'clock, Spain might also be unique in that it has a second prime time, running from 1430 to 1700, which coincides with the extended Spanish lunch break. Shows airing in the secondary prime time period on many occasions beat those prime time shows at night on a daily basis. The second prime time only occurs on weekdays, though, and the slot is usually filled with The Simpsons, news, soap operas and talk shows. In Sweden, prime time starts at 2000. It is preceded by a daily newscast at 1930 and local news at 1950. United Kingdom. In the UK, the term used is peak time. Early peak is 1730 to 2000 and late peak is 2000 to 2300. Latin America. In a great part of Latin American countries, prime time is considered to be from 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock p.m. to 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock p.m. The time slot is usually used for news, telenovelas and television series, and special time slots are used for reality shows, with great popularity, especially in Mexico and Brazil. In Mexico, prime time is known as Horario Estelar. In Brazil, it is called Horario Nobre, which is the time the three most famous telenovelas in the country are shown each weekday and on Saturdays. There are also news programs, reality shows, and sitcoms. Argentina. In Argentina, prime time is considered to be from 8:00 p.m. until 12:00 a.m., with the most successful series and telenovelas in the country, and entertainment shows, like CQC. Chile. In Chile, prime time is considered to be from 10:30 p.m. until 1 o'clock a.m., with the most successful series and telenovelas in the country. Investigation entertainment shows also air. North America. In North America, television networks feed the primetime programming in two blocks, one for the Eastern, Central, and Mountain time zones, and one for the Pacific, Alaskan, and Hawaiian time zones, to the local network affiliates. In Atlantic Canada as well as Alaska and Hawaii, there is no change in the interpretation or usage of prime time, as the concept is not attached to time zones in any way. Affiliates in the Mountain, Alaskan, and Hawaii Aleutian zones are either on their own to broadcast delay by an hour or two, or collectively form a small, regional network feed with others in the same time zone. Prime time is commonly defined as 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern, Pacific, and 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock p.m. Central, Mountain. On Sundays, the four major broadcast television networks traditionally begin the primetime programming at 7 o'clock p.m. instead. Some networks such as Fox, the CW, and My Network TV only broadcast from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock p.m. p.m. a time period known as common prime. Most networks air primetime programming nightly, but the smaller CW and My Network TV only broadcast primetime programs on weekdays, leaving weekends to their affiliates. The major American networks have come to consider Saturday primetime as a graveyard slot, and have largely abandoned scheduling of new scripted programming on that night. The major networks still maintain a primetime programming schedule on Saturdays, while live sporting events are generally preferred to fill the time slot. They typically air encores of programs aired earlier in the week, films, non-scripted reality programs, and, occasionally, burned-off episodes of low-rated or cancelled series. Primetime can be extended or truncated if coverage of sporting events run past their allotted end time. Since the Heidi Game incident in 1968, in which NBC cut away from coverage of a New York Jets-Oakland Raiders football game on the East Coast in order to show a movie, the later National Football League mandated that all games be broadcast in their entirety in the markets of the teams involved. Due to this rule, game telecasts may sometimes overrun into the 7 o'clock p.m. ET hour. Fox previously scheduled repeats of its animated series in the 7 o'clock hour, allowing themselves to simply pre-empt the reruns if a game ran long. This was later replaced by a half-hour-long wrap-up show, the OT. In contrast, CBS does not, as its weekly news magazine 60 Minutes has traditionally aired as close to 7 o'clock p.m. ET as possible. If a game runs long, 60 Minutes is shown in its entirety at the conclusion of coverage, and the rest of the prime time schedule on the East Coast is shifted to compensate. For example, if game coverage were to end at 7:30 p.m., prime time would end at 11:30 p.m. However, in the rare case where the NFL game runs excessively late, an episode of a series scheduled for later in the evening may be preempted. In an extreme case, CBS's prime time can be extended past midnight during broadcasts of the NCAA Division I men's basketball tournament. This does not necessarily apply universally. In 2001, after an XFL game went into overtime, forcing the delay of the highly promoted episode of Saturday Night Live, NBC made a decision to cut off all future XFL broadcasts at 11 o'clock p.m. NBC backed out of the XFL after the end of that season, leading to its failure. Until the U.S. Federal Communications Commission regulated time slots prior to primetime with the now-defunct Primetime Access Rule in 1971-1972, networks began programming at 7:30 p.m. Eastern and Pacific, 6:30 p.m. Central and Mountain on weeknights. The change helped instigate what is colloquially known as the rural purge, in which rural-themed and older skewing programs were disproportionately cancelled. In the 1987-1988 season, NBC-owned stations in several cities experimented with airing a schedule of syndicated first-run sitcoms at 7:30, 6:30 p.m. to compete against syndicated reruns of game shows such as Wheel of Fortune on rival stations. The vast majority of primetime programming in English-speaking North America comes from the United States, with only a limited amount produced in Canada. The Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission mandates quotas for Canadian content in prime time. These quotas indicate at least half of Canadian primetime programs must be Canadian in origin, but the majority of this is served by national and local news or localized entertainment gossip shows such as Global's ET Canada and CTV's iTalk. Likewise, the vast majority of Spanish-language programming in North America comes from Mexico. Televisa, a Mexican network, provides the majority of programming to the dominant U.S.-based Spanish broadcaster, Univision. Univision does produce a fairly large amount of unscripted Spanish-language programming, the best known being the long-running variety show Sábado Gigante, hosted and created by Chilean national Don Francisco. Univision's distant second-place competitor, Telemundo, produces a much greater share of in-house content, including a long line of telenovelas. In Quebec, the largest francophone area of North America, French-language programming consists of originally produced programs and French-language dubs of English-language programs. Relationship to radio and television revenue in the United States. Prime time is the day part with the most viewers and is generally where television networks and local stations reap much of their advertising revenues. In recent years, television advertising expenditure in the U.S. has been highest during prime-time drama shows. The Nielsen ratings system is explicitly designed for the optimum measurement of audience viewership by dayparts, with prime time being of most interest. Most people tend to watch television at prime time, as most often, based on standard working time. The end of the workday coincides with prime time viewing hours. Most viewers sit down to watch TV after dinner. This is usually the main reason for the high ratings for television programming at this time, as well as the attraction of the time slot for advertisers. The existence of prime time in the United States is largely an artifact of now repealed regulations of the Federal Communications Commission, which limited the number of hours that a network can require its affiliates to broadcast. Additionally, networks may also choose to provide local affiliates the opportunity to air sporting events or other special events which may fall outside of standard designated network broadcast times. Prime time for radio is called drive time, and in Eastern and Pacific time is 6 to 10 a.m. and 3 to 7 p.m., and for Mountain and Central time is 5 to 9 a.m. and 2 to 6 p.m. A survey by Nielsen revealed that viewers watched almost 2 hours worth of TV during prime time. Oceania, Australia. Prime time in Australia is officially from 6 o'clock p.m. to midnight following Australian Eastern Standard Time, with the highest ratings normally achieved between 6 o'clock p.m. to 9 o'clock p.m. New Zealand. Traditionally, prime time in New Zealand is considered to be 7:30 to 10:30 but can be extended to cover the entire evening of television.